Здравствуйте. Как Алексей сказал, мы будем говорить по-английски, к сожалению, не по-русски. Thank you for having us here, and it's a great pleasure to engage in this short dialogue with Alexandra. You have probably seen her work, Delicate Instruments of Engagement, that was taking place yesterday and today in the Russian Museum. And we will come to that work at the end. So the structure of the talk would be that Alexandra would speak about 4 different works since 2011 on, and I will try to ask some questions, and of course you are also free to ask questions. And at the end we'll come to what has been happening in the Russian Museum. Just a few words about Alexandra is that, she has been very, very demanded and engaged and wanted artist in many various contexts, and both in visual arts and in performing arts, but also is somebody who is very close to the theory, so it's active on many fields, which is maybe quite symptomatic for our times also. And for example, we are here in the Performing Arts Festival, but this festival started yesterday in the museum, right? So it's also a sign of how things overlap or intermingle in our times, and maybe through Alexandra actions we'll also try to make some sense out of it. Just to name a few projects where Alexandra has been involved, so at the moment, maybe you know this big exhibition in Germany, Münster Skulpturprojekte. It's an exhibition curated by Kasper König, the same curator who was the main curator of Manifesta 10. So till I think October you can still see Alexandra's work there, but you can also see, you could have seen her work in such theaters like Hebel Theater, Hau in Berlin, or in 2013 at the 55th Venice Biennial. It was one of most famous works of yours that we will also speak about today. We also had the pleasure to work on a few occasions together, so we will also speak about the project we did actually just outside of this building with the Catherine the Great Monument recently. Yes, so Alexandra, thank you very much for engaging in this talk, and what I wanted to, does it work like this with the translation, or shall we... Yeah, you are. It's okay for you. You are not too confused. Yeah, okay. So we can go on. Yes. So you have this, Alexandra. You have these 2 strands. Very often, to me, you make exhibitions alive in some sense. You know that when I enter to your installations or to your projects, you feel that. The spaces of the museum are not that rigid anymore, are not that stable, not that immobile, that there is this performative element, although, depends how one calls it. So this is perhaps something from the terms and conditions of the theater or performing arts that you are bringing in the museum. On one hand, this is one body of your work. Another body of your work is often to work in the public realm and to, in a very delicate and subtle manner, do something which is actually quite strong, namely some kind of interventions on the monuments. This is you've been engaging with. So I thought maybe we can start from the beginning. So one of your first actions in your native Bucharest, where you come from, shall we just go on and look at the action called "If you don't want us, we want you."
Если вы не хотите спрашивать, вы нам не нужны. Так называлась одна из первых акций Александра в Бухаресте.
Okay. I thought I can show both, but so this is an image which is actually a postcard that represents one.
Can you hear, or you need a?
I think I can also speak louder. I prefer not to use the mic. I try to project. Okay. It's a small space. I think it's nice if it's more informal.
Okay.
I would just like to just quickly introduce my practice, because I think maybe it makes sense to have a bit more information. So I was trained as a ballet dancer. I went to the Vienna State Opera Ballet School. So I have a classical ballet training. Then I did I went to the choreography section of the National University for Drama and Film in Bucharest in Romania. So I slowly realized, I actually had a Russian teacher in Vienna, Nadezhda Tikhonova, and she also trained Natalia Makarova, so they were teaching Vaganova, kind of method. This
so
is
you were
also
on your way to become a very skilled ballet.
Yes, in a sense, because I think it's important somehow to also understand how I reached this rather minimal and more casual aesthetic, and my preference for something that is maybe skilled and very virtuosic, but in different ways than what the classical ballet body would have to perform. Yes, so I slowly moved into more conceptual realms, let's say. I was interested in study. I realized I don't want to go into the opera house.
But when was this moment? Because then you are on the way to become a ballet dancer. Something must have, interrupted this process.
Yes.
So what was this moment?
I mean, to be honest, from my class in Vienna, I think 2 people ended up continuing with going into the opera house and pursuing a career in classical ballet. So again, it's something very strenuous. It's like the military, but in dance. And I think at some point I realized that the kind of sacrifice that you have to make for this career does not allow you to pursue anything, not anything else, but it's of course it can be very rewarding and a very beautiful career in a way, but then you have to dedicate all your time to that. And I was interested in exploring also other movement systems and other ways of being, let's say, in front of an audience. I think maybe it's nice to wait.
Yeah, a little bit.
Just because yes, so I slowly realized I would like to also try to work in different movement systems. I went to this choreography section that just opened at the National University for Drama and Film in Bucharest, where they were teaching contemporary dance, meaning, I don't know, Martha Graham, Merce Cunningham technique. Not very contemporary, but still, it wasn't a classical ballet. And I also, even from there, I slowly drifted into, let's say, I became more interested in what the Judson Church was producing in the 60s and 70s, this sort of post-modern dance, and what choreographers like Jérôme Bel and Xavier Laura were producing in the 90s, so what was traditionally called non-dance, let's say, in the dance world. So very minimal movement, sometimes pedestrian movement or very casual gestures that could become choreography. And of course this understanding of choreography as anything that deals with movement in space and time. So you could choreograph an object or a conversation. It wasn't strictly limited to the more traditional understanding of dance.
Every movement we produce is already choreographed in there.
And to come to this, so I was already working and showing work for the stage, for the theater stage, in relation to this institution in Bucharest, which still exists. It's called the National Dance Center in Bucharest. It's the only institution for contemporary dance, let's say, and performing arts.
But it's a strong one, isn't it?
It's now it doesn't have a budget this year, for example, so it's not that strong. It persists, but it does not really grow, which is also interesting in many ways. Yeah, so I was already making work and making my own work for the stage, and it was after 2008 and after the crisis, the big financial crisis in 2008, that a lot of governments, I think, worldwide were using the crisis to cut funding for the arts, also, including the Romanian government, who all of a sudden said it has no money for culture. So they were cutting funding for this National Dance Center and putting a lot of money at the same time into this public monument, which I don't have an image of, but it's a huge sculptural ensemble right in front of the National Theatre. It costed around 2 million euros, so there was money for that. So something that was officially, let's say, validated and accepted. At the same time, so they were cutting funding for this National Dance Center, and it was kicked out of its space that it then occupied and left without a space to function. So without a stage to show the new productions and without a space in which you could rehearse. And we staged a series of Occupy actions. This was 2010 now already, towards 2011.
But when you say we, who do you mean?
Were the group of choreographers choreographers and artists, there were also visual artists. It was a quite mixed scene around this National Dance Center. It wasn't just dancers, you had also anthropologists or people that were more interested in theory or in discourse, dancers but also visual artists, and choreographers that were again more interested in experimenting with different formats. And also I think a lot of the work that I was doing for the stage, because the theater space, the architecture of the theater space invites the traditional architecture of the theater space, right? You have a stage and the audience, like now. And it invites a certain experience of whatever happens on stage. Meaning that you're all together in one place, you know, if one of you now would stand up and move out, everyone will see this person. It feels like a statement of rejection sometimes, so obviously you're not interested in what I would have to say, everybody would understand that. So getting out, moving in and out of the theater, of the traditional theater space, it's somehow a statement in itself. So then working for the theater also means that you have to work with a certain duration, that you have to work with certain things in mind, that you have to build your actions in a certain way, so that people don't get bored. You can't, you know, it's very hard now for some people to follow something that is linear, let's say, by sitting down in one spot. You also cannot change perspective, so there are many things that produce a very specific experience of work in a theater, and you could have a very different experience of a work in another space. And of course the exhibition space is traditionally coded in a different way. So I was already making work that I felt didn't function very well in theater. Yeah, I would have liked people to move around it differently. And on the occasion of these cuts of funding and these Occupy actions, me and some friends, actually, it was my proposal, but we realized it together. I proposed that we embody, so that we enact this huge sculptural ensemble that was in front of the National Theatre. So it was basically just a life-size, a human-size version of this sculptural ensemble with us, you know, kind of just performing these sculptures, trying to embody them. And the first gesture, I propose that we do this every day for a couple of hours. So for 1 week, that we persist there, so it's not like a guerrilla action for 2 minutes where you just do something and you take a photo.
And what was the monument?
I'm sorry, I don't have it. Unfortunately, I just realized that is actually the very first work, but this is the next one.
What does it mean? What is the context?
So this is the next work that I made after that. I'm just describing this older work. The point was that we were saying, okay, if only public monuments and only this official culture is funded and accepted, then we can, it was an ironic statement, we can also produce it, and we can produce a cheaper version, and it's a more flexible version, you know, and then it's a more interesting one. So we can do this as well.
So the first action wasn't yet your work, it was more of a collective.
It was my proposal, but it was part of an Occupy sitting. So we were in this National Dance Center before it was evacuated, and trying to raise awareness, let's say, or like to protest this political assigning of funding for a type of art in the detriment of another. And that's also when I became quite interested in this relationship, in this also, let's say, political meaning of materiality, and in this relationship between the human body and how it is represented usually in official culture, or let's say public monuments. Also this difference in scale, so of course the monumentality, the materials that you usually use for public monuments, you know, which are meant to endure, so you always have something in stone or bronze, something fixed, that is supposed to embody history in a fixed form. So history is this, these are the victors, the losers are not commemorated, or, you know, it's a way of asserting some kind of power by saying this is how it happened, this is what is worth remembering, and so on. And
I guess people in St. Petersburg understand this very well.
Well, yeah, but it's also, I mean, you know, it was communist Romania. This is, for example, the action here. It's a sculptural addition to the equestrian of Carol I. He was the first king of Romania. This equestrian, actually the original one, was torn down in the 60s by the communist regime because again you didn't want, ideologically that things changed, so you didn't want to commemorate the king, the monarch. Then after the revolution in 1989, when I think it also happened throughout the former Soviet Union, all statues of Lenin or were taken down, so there was this change of projecting history and ideology. Of course, also all statues of Marx and Lenin in Romania were removed, and then here in the square, they just thought, oh, maybe we should just resurrect this old monument of the king. This was in the 90s, so again, made no sense. Romania is not a monarchy anymore. Hope never again. But well, so there was also this lack of political imaginary, I think, or of an image of a future. And then we just went back to whatever they were commemorating in the, 1910 or 1930s. The action basically, so I was interested in this process of embodying and creating a tension between the human body and the monument, and also finding ways to interfere with their significance, with what they mean, let's say. And somehow, because of the material, you couldn't really change anything in a monument. It's not like you can come and remodel it. So the public agency over these public monuments is actually very limited. They just appear in the public space, and you can't change anything with how they appear. And then I thought, okay, if we use bodies to interfere with their significance and their meaning, then we could really perform these additions. So we use ourselves to create a détournement in their significance, in what they mean. And in this case, basically, I mean, of course, it can be interpreted, I think, in other ways. But I was interested in. So we were looking at the monument and thought, what do we identify with? And it wasn't so much the man on the horse, so the monarch, the man in charge and in control. And we thought that the condition of the Romanian citizen at that point in time was more or less could be relatable to the horse. So with this, with this position in which you were controlled and governed in a way that you don't agree with, let's say. So it made sense to try to embody the horse and to add this human-horse hybrid and this small entourage of horses to the monarch, to this one figure.
I actually find it quite empowering that what you do to a human body in the relation with those monuments, that you show that some quite fragile entity as a human flesh, human body is, can really contradict or create a certain scale, completely changing interpretation of this big, static, hegemonic.
And then also because of this intention, the point was to do it for a long time, or to have something that persists. So of course the human body and the human material is frail and fragile, so we would be there for a couple of hours every day for a week, so that it would be something that persists. And this is another image of the monument to the Romanian Revolution. So this pike is the monument to the Romanian Revolution in '89. So again, that happened simultaneously with the fall of the Eastern Bloc. It's mocked everywhere in Romania. It's called the potato on a stick, or whatever, and it has many derogatory names. And also it's called the pike, and the pike in Romanian also has this connotation of a trickery. So you say you got piked, let's say, like impaled. It means that you were tricked into doing something you had no interest in doing, really. So in relationship to the Romanian Revolution, somehow the calling this monument the pike, it's also an acknowledgement that Romanian people actually performed in a theater play, or people after the Romanian Revolution understood a lot of them, what was the larger geopolitical arrangement and how actually, they were part of a bigger thing, and it wasn't just, the regime, the communist regime didn't fall in Romania just because people took to the streets on those particular days.
But why is this such a derogatory monument? It stands for something that should be a collective and recent experience.
Exactly, but this recent experience, in retrospect, has been seen very differently. So people, again, as I said, understood. In 89, when people went out in the street and they died, a lot of them, for this change of regime, they didn't understand that they were part of a larger geopolitical game. So of course you knew about the Cold War, but you didn't know about the perestroika. You didn't understand that something was agreed to change. So they thought, now we go out and everything falls because we are out in the streets. And of course, there was all this propaganda and all this diversion around. Everybody was talking about terrorists. Nobody really knew who is fighting anymore. It's the Russians, it's the Americans. It was this whole confusion. So again, there was this sensation in retrospect that people were tricked into performing a revolution for larger geopolitical forces. Of course, but of course it embodied a certain national feeling. So people were genuinely unhappy and everything was crumbling. That's why they actually took to the streets. But of course, it was part of a different arrangement that was being made at a different level. So basically then we were just embodying, but it's exactly this that I thought that this derogatory interpretation of the monument, who is also, it's also quite strange monument, or nobody really likes it.
It's not so bad.
It is, I think it's very bad, but it it's just, it's like a...
Excuse me, and may I ask one question? But what was practically the action with this fight? What you did with it?
Well, I don't know how well you can see. It was just a group of people, including myself, lying in the shadow of the pike, kind of following the shape.
Вот эта пика, она отбрасывает тень, и суть акции заключалась в том, что мы с несколькими перформерами ложились в эту тень и следовали за...
And moving with the shadow, moving with the shape.
Следовали за тенью.
For how long?
Again, a couple of hours every day for a week. It was together with this other action at the equestrian statue. They're very close to each other.
И на самом деле
It's a city center. It's rich in public monuments.
То есть эти акции соотносимы.
Maybe one day you can have a big army of people doing
No,
simultaneously interventions to all Bucharest.
Yeah, but anyway, we could go into many directions. Maybe just to reach the work here as well in due time. Again, as I said, I was interested in how the human body can change the significance of something that is fixed and it functions in a different material.
But do you think it also gives certain agency not only to the body, human body who does it, but does it also give agency in some sense to this monument? Does it liberate this monument from?
In a sense, I hope so. I think it liberates a certain reading of history that has to be confined to one way of seeing things. So again, it turns history into what it is, this total fiction and a very subjective construct. There is no fixed or true history, there are many perspectives, and usually whoever has the power to write it will write it in a certain way. And then I think with these performative actions you can reclaim some sort of agency for different point of views or for different perspectives on history also, on how it was written. So there is this rewriting also of whatever we thought is clear for everybody at the point.
There's also this term of interpassivity of monuments. That the monuments actually are there to think for us, because we are too lazy to remember, or we lazy in some sense.
It petrifies a certain view of the world at a certain point, and they say that, okay, this is... And again, it's a symbolic way of asserting power, and they are still being constructed everywhere. Well, mostly in Eastern Europe, I think. Macedonia has also this crazy monument, public monument boom. Everybody's building all this.
But even Berlin is rebuilding the castle from end of 19th century at the moment. So it's part of larger historization, maybe a comeback in some sense.
Yeah, and so there again there is this aspect that is very much related to history in relation to the works that deal with public monuments, but then there's also this other aspect that deals with the tension and also the alliance between the body and these other materials or these previously formed objects.
And you were insisting quite often, I don't know if you still keep to that, that what you're doing is not a performance, it's a sculpture.
It depends. In the public space, and maybe now we can also come to this work from Manifesta. Oh no. Wait.
No, maybe if you put press the...
This?
Yeah.
No, I can.
This?
Yeah, I think so.
This or one,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because you can't really see the... Oh well, it's fine. Yeah, I refer to these works as cultural editions. So this is part of the work we did together at the invitation of Joanna for Manifesta 3 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
And again, the invitation came somehow in relation to public space monuments in St. Petersburg. So I was, of course, also looking at the Lenin monument in Pirici. And I refer to them as sculptures because I would like them to be seen from this perspective and within this convention. So I think language is, of course, also performative. So if you say this is a performance of this is a theater play, people will look at that, accessing the references and the previous information they have about a theater play. And I wanted people to look at this, accessing their information about sculpture and public monuments. So if you say, this is a sculpture now, and us two are a sculpture, then you can maybe look at ourselves as if you're looking at a sculpture and you start to associate this situation with that.
And also what, do you, maybe we can also describe in few words what exactly these participants are doing, who are they actually, and then...
So the core is a group of gymnasts. The original inspiration was this Castellers practice in Barcelona, with the people kind of building these towers on top of each other, and it's a quite communitary project. So the core is a group of gymnasts, but there are also other people who just joined at the base, somehow trying to support. And it's an enactment of the Lenin monument with a woman on top, and basically opening up the perspective. So you have this, all statues of Lenin, but it's mostly, about
iconic ones.
Yeah, ideological also performative gesture. So you go this way, and this is the only way. And then she's basically just, I think, adding to the initial monument and opening up the perspective, or at least that's what I imagined would be right. So she's also showing in a different direction, but she's also opening up. So there's a female complement, of course.
But also what we were talking yesterday, what I think is very interesting and in this addition to existing Lenin monument is that, of course, Lenin commemorates certain revolutionary moments, and not himself. He commemorates the collectivity coming together in an effort or something. But in Russia, I don't know if you would agree, but it seems like it's cast in bronze, and the last thing you would think of is the possibility of a revolution. It commemorates something that can never happen again in some sense. So I like this moment of staging an effort, because of course you need to work together in order to bring somebody up. She will never be there up on herself. So you enable also this monument to stand for what it's supposed to stand, and meantime it got forgotten in some sense.
Well, actually from my research, what I found out, do correct me if I'm wrong, but most of the Lenin statues proliferated in the Russian space after his death, so during Stalin's reign. So this image of Lenin actually has been massively instrumentalized to then represent a certain type of politics that didn't really have. I mean, it had a lot to do with Lenin's politics, but it was also a very clear departure from that. And so these monuments of Lenin actually don't really represent Leninism so much as they represent the Stalinist instrumentalization of his image. And then of course there is this very nice Boris Groys article that we referred to about this, the body of Lenin being exhibited in Moscow as...
how you call it? The mummy of Lenin?
Mummy,
yeah, actually read also quite a bit about that. That it was preserved by all future political leaders with this purpose to show the world that he's dead, that there's nothing about him that can actually return, or like, well, the way Boris Groys puts it is that if he would become invisible, if you wouldn't see the body, then you could think about his ghost, or his, something that could haunt you. Like in the Communist Manifesto, you know, the specter of communism that could re-haunt you. Whereas like this, there's no specter to haunt you anymore, but it's just this visible dead body.
So till he's not buried yet, so he cannot come and haunt you.
There's no return. Yeah, and maybe, yeah, we can also, I mean, if there are questions or so we don't speak about our issues. If there are questions, also 1 hour at the end.
Yeah, no, please free to, you know, about monuments of Lenin, I'm sure you have lots to say.
Yeah, we'll have some questions.
Great.
Okay.
Реакция зрителей на эти перформансы.
And it's interesting question about how usually audience is reacting on these statues, especially in the era when you have it not just like one performance, but when it continues.
I mean, with the Lenin sculpture, actually, we only performed it a couple of times, and it was a very short situation. But I remember that there was a lot of interest, so people immediately started to take photos and to gather around it.
There were even more cameras than yesterday at your press.
And because it was announced actually that we will do a sculptural edition at the Lenin Monument, I think there was also this petition from, I'm not sure if it was the actual Communist Party now, or like some people identifying with it, asking to be stopped even before it happened. But it circulated online. I think it was, you know. Because I also think they thought it would be a derogatory action or something, you know, trying to, and we were trying to explain that it's actually a sculptural addition again, so there is this concept of adding and not trying to tear down.
But you also called it soft power
Of
Lenin, but also we did the series, yeah? So what did you mean with that?
Yeah. So there was a series of sculptural editions that I didn't bring the other photos. So we also did something at the monument of Peter the Great, with people sunbathing on the thunderstone. Just. And yeah, so the title of the whole project was Soft Power. And especially, I mean, Manifesta happened again here right after this very controversial law that was somehow banning, let's say, homosexual propaganda from public space. And there was a lot of debate in the Western world, especially, and around Manifesta, on why should it happen in Russia now, and whether it makes sense to do that, whether rather we should, you know, the exhibition should boycott the country, which is also this idea of boycotting one country it's very complicated, I think. And when we, so again, the point of not going to Russia at that moment was very much debated, and in the end, both Kasper and you also agreed to take on this challenge to do something in that particular context, yes. And I think the title just referred to a different strategy of addressing political
Но
issues.
я считаю, что должна быть совсем другая стратегия взаимодействия с политическими вопросами.
And that somehow, yeah, it's all about strategy with politics. That maybe at certain moments in time you can, and this has also a lot to do with Lenin, I think, you know, you can change strategy and you can be very flexible in how you try to reach a certain goal. And then of course the success of that attempt is very much debatable, like it was I think with Manifesta and everything we did. Since you're also asking about reactions, I think, so for some people, there was never any open outrage for any of these
Что
works.
касается вашего вопроса по поводу зрителей, никогда не было прямой агрессии, не было никогда.
There was this one situation for the monument of Peter the Great, where this one guy got very upset from the public that people are lying on the thunderstone. But this was just one time.
Да, один раз только один человек был очень сильно расстроен, когда мы лежали и загорали на одном саде. Вот единственный случай.
And otherwise, and maybe I'm just going to say this because it's interesting in terms of politics and of power. So what happened in near the Peter the Great monument? I'm sorry, I don't have an image. Basically, you know the monument, and then the equestrian is placed on this thunderstone, and we were allowed to. We had an authorization via the Hermitage Museum somehow to be able to lay, just to sunbathe. So we had a couple of performers who were climbing somehow the thunderstone and just sunbathing there.
Да, чтобы наши перформеры собрались на громком.
So again, nothing like, you know, very obviously taking out the monument, but just again creating it as a site for sunbathing.
Да, мы просто использовали его как место для загара.
And there's in the park, in the near, basically, we saw this also the couple of days before, that people were trying to lay on the grass. So again, you can lay on the grass.
с контекста, потому что вот в парке, ну, садик, который рядом с памятником, там люди тоже.
I don't know if it's the same now, but then there were some not policemen, I don't know how you guards, public guards, would come and systematically tell people to move away from the grass. So whenever it was getting full of people sunbathing, they were coming and telling people sit up, you know. And then what happened on the last day during our action is that so people were sunbathing on the monument, but you couldn't sunbathe on the grass in the park.
Сложилась такая ситуация, что вы могли загорать на памятнике, но вы не могли загорать на газоне.
And some people saw that, and they came to us like, what is happening, and then we showed the authorization. Everything I do in the public space is authorized. And this is important, so we always try to get an authorization, so it becomes legal, it's legitimate, it's not getting large. And then, so I think around 10 people gradually that couldn't stay on the grass anymore came. I don't have the image, but for sure not one. There's a small fence, like it's a green plant fence, small fence, surrounding the monument. And they stepped over it and they started to sunbathe within this safe space, let's say.
На газоне, они входили в пространство памятника, и вот уже за этим забором, то есть внутри памятника, они начали загорать.
So somehow moving from the park, so from the public space in which they could not perform this action, to this confined space of the monument, which was in a way more complicated to touch, or it would have been completely forbidden to be there. And for me, that somehow was a very interesting. I thought that was a success.
Я думаю, это на самом деле потому что искусство открыло возможность.
Yeah, in a very unambitious way in the end, But I thought that creating this space where things can happen, even for a very short time, or where, or even in revealing the absurdity of this situation. I thought there was something. Right,
or even relocating something which should be a public space outside in this confined element where the permission was established for a short moment of time.
С другой стороны, мы в каком-то смысле перемещаем это пространство публичного, где как бы все можем без специальных разрешений, наоборот, некий такой загон, где вы можете что-то осуществлять только если у вас есть разрешение.
So another action was made just outside of Alexandria's theater.
Да, и вот здесь перед Александринским, в Кайском саммите, перед моментом Екатерины Великой была следующая акция.
I'm just showing the image. If anybody has a question after, I would maybe try to move to.
Yes, yes, Venice, yeah.
So if there's something interesting about it, we can. If not, and then maybe I would just go to some works in the exhibition space or in the white cube.
Теперь я перешла к моим работам в выставочных пространствах.
So this practice of embodiment and of enactment, of somehow transforming static and fixed objects into an action or into something flexible. I also used, together with a fellow artist, for a work with Manuel Pelmuș, for a work in the Romanian Pavilion during the 53rd edition or 55th in 2013 exactly, of the Venice Biennale. And we proposed a retrospective of the Venice Biennale, meaning the institution of the Venice Biennale, so all the editions, a retrospective of the Venice Biennale from 1895 until 2013, until that day, that edition.
But the choice of work on this time.
Yes, from all different editions, from all pavilions, embodied by 5 performers.
То есть 5 перформеров воспроизводили объекты, которые вот за всю историю Венецианской биеннале так выполняются.
Of course, over the course of the biennale. So for 5 performers that would be in the exhibition space, in the Romanian pavilion, in the empty Romanian pavilion, every day for 8 hours a day for 3 months. Of the, oh no, 3 months, it's 6
months, yeah.
Think about it.
So actually the whole Romanian pavilion was just empty space with 5
Yes,
performers.
yes.
Performing
Yes.
every day for 6 days.
And it, of course, then it's not 5 people, it was around 30 something, with many groups changing over time, but always 5 people.
Румынский павильон представлял собой огромное пустое пространство, где постоянно находились перформеры, и 6 часов каждый день они весь день устраивали перформанс.
And we performed a selection of around 103 artworks and let's say events that were significant from the history of the biennial. But also more obscured ones or the ones that were not so well known. And I'm just going to show, I mean, the way the action function was that the performers would pick a place in the pavilion, they would announce the work that they're embodying, so there was, as opposed, for example, to the work in the Russian Museum where you don't know what you see, so there it was quite clear. They would say, Pablo Picasso, Guernica, the year of in which the artwork was being made, it functioned like a wall label. So the performers were just announcing the wall.
And where was Guernica? In the main pavilion.
Guernica actually was not really, it was a reproduction of Guernica that was shown in Venice because it never traveled from Reina Sofia. It doesn't go away from there. I just gave an example but on how the action took place. So there was one performer announcing what artwork they embody, and then something happened. And I'm just going to go through some images, and each situation was held for a couple of minutes. So it was very sculptural. So it was like an object, but with people.
So they were not moving. You mean?
But it's not this kind of petrification, but you just try to hold still.
To embody.
For a couple of minutes. 2 minutes. So this is, for example, an enactment of this famous Maurizio Cattelan work, La Nona Ora, the 9th hour, with the Pope struck by a meteorite.
Which we saw in TV show now. Это работа, которую вы, может, вы видели в заставке молодого папы, когда Иоанн Павел II в университете Вечной Христи падает. Это просто, кто не знает, это отсылка к известной очень скульптуре современной, которая была представлена в Венеции.
But of course it still becomes a bit more abstract. And this is, for example, an enactment of this famous Marcel Duchamp postcard, Mona Lisa with mustache.
Это отсылка к Марселю Дюшаму, Мона Лиза с усами.
So it's a work by Marcel Duchamp in which he took a postcard depicting Mona Lisa and drew a mustache.
Вы знаете, когда Дюшам взял портрет Моны Лизы, приписал к нему.
And yeah, then this is also an enactment of a Joseph Beuys work, Tram Stop Monument to the Future. Unfortunately, I don't have any videos, but it's also more lively than it seems. So there weren't always these very static objects.
Нельзя сказать, что это всегда были статичные такие объекты.
There were also some actions, also some songs. So
Было некое действие, quite like in Russian music.
yeah, but the main references were artworks.
Okay.
And again, it was still very static.
Okay.
So whenever the object was being constructed, it was there to stay, like a sculpture.
Ну, и это было примерно по структуре, как акция в Русском музее, но более статично, потому что мы рассматривали не события, а именно объекты искусства.
And also the order, because now we slowly come to the work in the Russian Museum.
Да,
So
сейчас мы постепенно
maybe you can
подходим
speak
к Русскому
a little
музею.
bit because that was in 2013. Since then you have made a number of different interventions in the museums. You've been asked in different contexts. So how did you work and how did you develop these protocols somehow of how this kind of work is produced? For example, in Münster and a little bit in the Russian Museum, the audience has some kind of influence on the order of how things are performed.
In Münster, there is no influence.
I mean, there is influence on the Google search.
Yeah, but it's a part of the work. But the order, yes. So in relation to the order here was basically random, let's say. So there was nothing in the dramaturgy of the work that was supposed to be followed. Let's say it didn't really matter if after Joseph Beuys' work you have, I don't know, a Robert Rauschenberg work, and then Maurizio Cattelan. Also because, in a sense, there is no, there is no personal and very, let's say, personal historical significance to these works, outside of what they mean for the art history canon. And of course, Guernica is different, but in general, I'm trying to create a parallel to the work in the Russian Museum. So basically, the order, the dramaturgy, there was no dramaturgy for the order. It didn't matter if you saw one after the other or if you just saw.
Was it also because you can, as in the museum, come in and out in any time?
Yes,
So
yes.
basically you get this part, you edit out of it. Yeah.
Whereas, for example, with the work in Münster and also with this work here now in the Russian Museum, I think there is a narrative that you can follow. With the work in Münster, but maybe it doesn't really make sense to talk about it. I guess not. But it's important or it's interesting if you follow the dramaturgy. And I think for the work in the Russian Museum, though maybe still quite abstract and not so obvious, but there is a specific dramaturgy to the sequences. So the fact that, for example, you have an enactment of this first free television broadcast during the Romanian Revolution in '89, in which people are happy that they, now they are free, we made it, we won, we escaped this communist dictatorial regime. And then you have an enactment of a Coca-Cola commercial. So you have this.
Но внутри у нас на самом деле есть к этому другие, потому что, например, эпизод вот с первой трансляции, бесцензурной трансляции русской революции, когда все люди счастливы, понимаете, и так далее, коррелирует с рекламой Coca-Cola.
So it's not a random association,
То есть это
of course.
не какие-то внезапные ассоциации, это достаточно простое.
Or on the other hand, for example, and I'm just giving just the examples of combinations of situations that I think make sense. You have this fake sign language translator from Nelson Mandela's funeral. There is one enactment that references this situation. I don't know if it's familiar for you, but during Nelson Mandela's funeral in South Africa, there was a translator that was an imposter. And he stood next to all these important heads of states, including Obama.
С этой историей, она отсылает к истории, когда были похороны Нельсона Манделы, съехались, значит, все главы всех мировых государств, и там главный судопереводчик, который стоял и переводил всех этих важных людей, он не владел языком судоперевода.
And he was just signaling whatever, like.
Он просто делал руками все, что хотел.
And 2 minutes into the transmission, like people who were, I don't know the word in English. Yeah, they signaled that this guy is not actually, we don't understand it. He's just like, just doing whatever. And of course, then there was a whole discussion like, who is this person? How did he get to be next to Obama? You know, they even edited him out of all these television broadcasts because it was of course very funny. It became viral on YouTube. Just saying, it was very serious, but just going like this.
Ну, это было смешно, потому что он серьезно написал, какие-то смысленные пассы,
And we performed this as well, so it's a real event. It's not
мы как бы
fictional.
воспроизводим перформанс в Русском музее, вот это действительно настоящее событие.
And what was interesting after the event, of course, people were outraged, like, when this guy, anyway, to make a long story short, there was then a Zizek article discussing the whole situation in more interesting terms, somehow stating that he was actually signaling all the bullshit that was being said, so that he was performing, you know, that.
На самом деле после этого вышла статья Жижика, в которой он говорит, что на самом деле вот этот фейковый собственный переводчик был прав, потому что на самом деле все речи, которые там говорили, были обычные политические речи.
That he was basically more accurately signaling the speeches than if he would have just
вполне точно,
correctly reproduced.
точно, корректно переводил, потому что они говорили пустоту, он воспроизводил пустоту.
And for example, we try to emphasize on this. There is this specific signaling which he does not make. But for example, because this is a speech of Barack Obama, when he speaks about Nelson Mandela's triumph and about South Africa's freedom and democracy, and everybody knows, of course, that it's not. You know, this became such empty words, and the situation there is a lot more complicated. And the performers do this, this freedom and democracy. So you kind of more obviously signal the insignificance and the bullshit that they are actually speaking out. And then at the same time, so after this enactment, they start performing this George Michael Freedom 90s song. Which is also, if you listen to the lyrics, and I'm aware that a lot of things are in English, but I'm thinking that maybe the George Michael, I don't know, maybe it's somehow it's circulated more. It's a quite political song in many ways, and the refrain goes like, all we have to do now is take these lines and make them true somehow. So, in a sense, I think George Michael was speaking about a certain neoliberal concept of freedom that functions more or less just on the level of discourse. And I really like this idea that he says that we just have to make it true somehow. So freedom is not that you have to discard this concept of freedom just because there is a certain Western neoliberal imperial superficial agenda that uses.
Мне нравится эта мысль, которая записана в песне, то, что свобода это не то, что может принести кому-то, да, просто прийти и сказать, вы свободны, а свобода это то, что ты должен пройти.
But that you have to take the lie and make it true.
И ты должен как бы взять ложь и превратить ее в правду.
And the freedom and the democracy as well. So that, yeah.
Ну, мне нравятся такие как бы параллели и цитаты.
This is just an example of my way of ordering and creating dramaturgy, let's say, for this. Maybe there are more obvious.
Я так понимаю, что другие так устраивают, как другие свои
performances. So there are those dramaturgical moments, but there are things, these culture memes that some of them are obviously culture memes, but some like Akhmatova poem, for example. How did the Akhmatova poem end up in this meme illustration?
Ну и там есть какой-то набор каких-то событий, мемов. Вот, интересно, как, например,
but it's not really memes. I mean, there are a couple of things that are viral, including this Melania Trump, Michelle Obama speech. The only meme is the confused Travolta.
Ну, на самом деле, я не скажу, что есть мемы, там есть только мемы, которые разделены.
But it is also performed in this situation somehow overlapped or after or before the Akhmatova poem, which is called A Land Not Mine. Of course, we also worked, and Paula was the performer. She was great, and she learned the Russian translation, the Russian origin, the original. We had the English translation.
She translated it into Russian.
Который не говорит по-русски, ну, говорила достаточно хорошо, но с акцентом стихотворение Ахматовой «Земля, но не моя». То есть вот такая линия.
But then, of course, I mean, it's not up to me not to, of course, to discuss Akhmatova. But again, I think she's a, you know, essential character at a certain moment in time. And the poem, for me, from what I could understand from the English translation of the lyrics, shifts between the personal and the general and the political somehow. So she speaks about this land that is also very familiar, but also somehow far away, and about and about whether that she doesn't know if the world is ending or just one day. You know. So I think there is this shift between something that is very subjective and very situated, and something that is also affecting everybody. And it's also, I think, a quite political poem. In a not very obvious way.
Или только я, не вот это соотнесение какое-то того, что влияет лично на нас.
And I thought,
но важно для меня в этом.
and I thought it's also, she speaks about this feeling of recognizing and not recognizing home.
И также есть такой момент, когда я узнаю и не узнаю свой дом.
So, yeah, in that sense, I think it works quite well also, or it works well here and also in the context of the avant-garde section of the museum. And yeah, and in general there is a mixture of quite serious situations and more trivial ones. So this is something that
был такой микс из достаточно таких серьезных сцен и достаточно обыденных, даже смешных.
It's like a news feed a bit.
But,
Это немножко даже как лента Фейсбука.
so, and these instruments of engagement, what can you just tell us more what you mean by the instrument of engagement?
А что вы имеете в виду, когда
Had the exact same question, I think, yesterday at the
это
conference.
круги инструмента воздействия? В чем, какие инструменты здесь есть?
Of course, the reference is also made to the performers, so they are also the instruments, but then all these situations, events, political speeches and memes or images that also create, let's say, a more collective history, these are also referred to as instruments. I think they can be recombined, and basically this is also what the work tries to do, to recombine and to also create different associations between them because of these recombination and different layers of meanings, or maybe you reveal a layer of meaning that was previously obscured.
И с другой стороны, это то, как мы конструируем реальность, собирая разные ее куски, это тоже воздействует как инструмент взаимодействия с этой реальностью.
And of course the audience can select different beginnings.
Да, и аудитория может выбирать разные начала.
So there are a couple of sequences, there are 4 sequences. Some sequences have very similar material, but they're different switches in the order again, which produce again, I think, different dramaturgy.
4 начала, которые вы можете выбрать, и они на самом деле дают разный эффект. То есть от того, какой вы кусок выбрали первым, меняется концепция.
And I think we definitely follow the more, let's say, Brechtian line, you know, where you see how reality in the exhibition space, of course, is constructed. And then all these references to the real world reality, let's say, would make you think that, you know, reality can also be modified. And it's a construct also. It's a fiction and it's being constantly produced. So you can rewrite it or you can change, you can shift things.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you one more thing, I guess was last question, and then if you have some last questions, we will open up. We live generally in these times of attention economy, that there is so important attention economy. You know, it's economy of attention. That it's so important to create a moment where attention is on you or what you are doing. You know, the permanent need for that. How do you relate your work, which actually in some sense creates this attention, yeah, short, like we saw it yesterday. It was an amazing moment of attention economy and all these people coming there. But how do you reflect on it? On one hand, because probably you have a double relation to it, and also it's a very critical person. So how?
Чтобы получился какой-то эффект. И вот вчера тоже я видел все эти камеры на перформеров. Как вы с этим работаете?
I mean the concept of attention economy is actually used specifically for post-industrial societies and more specifically for mostly Western affluent societies. So, for example, to speak of attention economy in India at large is not. It's a bit more complicated. If you again, I assume you talk about it in the art world, let's say, and all this proliferation of biennials also, or like let's say event-based exhibitions.
Yeah, the rise of performance also.
Yes, but this has something to do with this, with post-industrial societies, also mostly Western. And then, of course, we can speak about the digital world and how the change in how you interact with information online, the fact that you have to be engaged.
And present.
Yes, of course, it creates a different need, I think, for cultural producers. And of course, then performance is more present in visual art contexts also because maybe people, but I think, again, we don't all live in the same world. I mean, we do, but we have still very different experiences. I wouldn't speak in Romania, let's say, I couldn't be critical about the inclusion of performative practices in the visual arts because there is no such thing. And of course you can go to the Tate Modern and you can speak about, which I showed work at the Tate together with Manuel Rousseau, and you can speak about that performance program and see why they made it and how. But at the same time, for example, in Romania, I would try to make a work in the National Art Museum, and it was also kind of a big scandal. Also featured let's say a trans performer, so technically a boy in a dress. And it was a big deal. And this wouldn't be a big deal at the Tate or in London. So again, we live in still quite different cultural context, which is not to say that one is necessarily better than the other. It depends.
No, but we understand it digitally. We all look for permanent news, This
yes, in that sense, I think to respond to a digital economy that is, of course, also based on attention and on engagement, I guess a lot of museum spaces also introduced events and live events. For example, today it was also interesting to be in front of this Malevich series of works. And you see many people, of course, looking at them and listening to the audio guides, but also taking tons of pictures. And also pictures that are very performative, so also young girls, just going like with these, all this, and it's in front of the, it's quite interesting because it's in front of the suprematists. And of course they will be posted on Instagram and, yeah. And of course, I think you can be uninterestingly critical with that, and just be sorry that people do not take time to contemplate for 1 hour the suprematist Malevich. Or I think you could also understand somehow this shift in subjectivity and try to work with the attention, but in a way that again would not consume itself fast and superficial, and it would invite you to spend time, and it would invite you to think about what you see and maybe to wonder what is it that these people are doing here. And again, I don't try to work with the event. That's why most of the works have this format of an exhibition. So they last for a couple of hours. Everything happens rather slow. There is nothing spectacular in the true sense of, or in a more traditional sense of spectacularity. So I guess I'm trying to work within this new attention economy, but by producing also a different type of attention. And I'm quite happy that I think a lot of people stayed for a long time or they followed the action for a bit
Иное
longer.
внимание.